The rain hammered against the glass windows of Bellissimo Ristorante like thousands of tiny fists demanding entry. Inside, the warmth of expensive wine and whispered conversations created a bubble of privilege that seemed impenetrable to the cold October night outside. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across pristine white tablecloths, where Chicago's elite cut into their $40 steaks with surgical precision. But tonight, this sanctuary of wealth would witness something that money couldn't buy: true humanity in its rawest form. What happened on that storm-drenched evening would expose the darkest corners of human nature and illuminate the brightest. A young woman's split-second decision to defend a stranger would set in motion events so extraordinary, so utterly unexpected, that everyone present would remember this night for the rest of their lives. Because sometimes, the universe tests us when we least expect it. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you save turns out to be the one who will change your entire world. Before we continue with this incredible story, the YouTube algorithm needs to know you're truly invested in seeing how this unfolds. The ending is so shocking, so beautifully unexpected, that you won't want to miss a single word. Subscribe to the channel right now and write in the comments where you're watching from. Your city, your state, your country. This simple action tells the platform you're engaged, and it will ensure you see this story through to its breathtaking conclusion without interruptions. Trust me, what's coming will leave you speechless. Emma Mitchell had been working at Bellissimo for 3 years, long enough to recognize the subtle hierarchies that governed this temple of fine dining. She knew which tables were reserved for the truly powerful, which wines impressed without bankrupting, and exactly how to smile through the casual cruelty that wealthy patrons sometimes displayed. At 26, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that her threadbare apartment and aging Toyota couldn't diminish. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a perfect bun, her white shirt pressed despite being washed so many times the fabric had grown thin. She moved through the restaurant like a dancer, balancing trays with grace, remembering orders with precision, treating every customer, whether they tipped 5% or 50%, with the same genuine kindness. Tonight had been particularly brutal. The storm had driven more people inside than usual, and the kitchen was backed up. Customers were impatient, demanding, their voices rising with each minute their appetizers were delayed. Emma's feet ached in her cheap shoes, but she kept her smile bright, her movements efficient. She was refilling water glasses at table 7 when she heard the commotion near the entrance. "I said, get out! We don't serve your kind here!" The voice belonged to Richard Thornton, the restaurant's general manager, a man who wore his authority like a weapon and his designer suits like armor. He stood near the entrance, his face flushed red, one manicured hand pointing toward the door with theatrical disgust. The object of his fury was a man who looked like he'd crawled out of a nightmare. The stranger's clothes hung off his frame in tattered layers, a coat that might have once been black, now faded to a hopeless gray, patched with duct tape and desperation. His hair was long, matted, streaked with premature gray despite a face that couldn't have been past 40. Dirt crusted his fingernails, and his boots, held together with wire and prayer, left wet prints on the polished marble floor. He stood there, hunched slightly, water dripping from his clothes to form a pool at his feet. But his eyes were what caught Emma's attention, clear, intelligent, watching everything with an intensity that seemed almost predatory. "Please," the man said, his voice surprisingly steady, surprisingly educated. "I just want something hot to eat. I have money." "Money?" Richard laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Whatever you scrape together from begging isn't welcome here. This is the establishment for refined clientele, not a soup kitchen. Leave before I call the police." The restaurant had gone quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The other diners watched with a mixture of disgust and morbid fascination, the way people observe a car accident, grateful it's not happening to them. Some women pulled their designer purses closer. One man actually moved his chair further from the aisle, as if poverty were contagious. Emma felt something crack open inside her chest. She recognized that look in the stranger's eyes, the horrible mixture of shame and defiance, the desperate attempt to maintain dignity while the world stripped it away piece by piece. She'd worn that expression herself 6 years ago, when her mother died and left her with nothing but medical debt and broken dreams. She remembered standing in the financial aid office at her college, begging for one more semester, just one more chance, while the administrator looked at her with the same disgust Richard now showed this stranger. Her hands moved before her mind caught up. She set down her water pitcher and walked toward the entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. "Emma, return to your tables," Richard commanded without looking at her. She ignored him. When she reached the stranger, she looked directly into those strange, intelligent eyes and said, "Sir, I have a table available in my section. If you'd like to follow me?" The restaurant seemed to inhale sharply, a collective gasp of shock. Richard's face transformed from red to purple. "Emma, what do you think you're doing?" "My job," she replied, her voice steady, despite the trembling in her hands. "Serving customers. You always say the customer is king, right? This vagrant is not a customer. He said he has money. That makes him a customer." Emma turned back to the stranger and gestured toward the dining room. "Please, sir, right this way." For a moment, the man just stared at her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or calculation, or something deeper she couldn't identify. Then he nodded slowly and followed her, his wet boots squeaking against the floor, leaving a trail of water like breadcrumbs through the suddenly silent restaurant. She led him to a table near the kitchen. Not the worst spot, but not prominently visible either. She pulled out the chair herself, handed him a menu and said, "I'll give you a moment to look over the options. Can I start you with some water? Coffee?" "Coffee would be wonderful," he said. And again she was struck by his voice. Cultured, controlled, completely at odds with his appearance. As she walked toward the kitchen, she felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant. She heard the whispers starting, the scandalized murmurs, and she heard Richard's footsteps behind her, quick and angry. He caught her arm near the kitchen doors, his grip tight enough to bruise. "My office, now. I have a customer to serve. Now." The office was barely larger than a closet, crammed with filing cabinets and schedules, and Richard's inflated sense of importance. He slammed the door and rounded on her, his finger jabbing toward her face. "Have you lost your mind? Do you have any idea what you've done? Those people out there." He gestured wildly toward the dining room. "Those people spend thousands here. They come for the ambiance, the exclusivity, and you just seated a homeless drug addict at table 12. "You don't know he's a drug addict," Emma said quietly. "Look at him. Of course he is." "God, Emma, I knew you were naive, but I didn't think you were stupid. That man probably hasn't bathed in weeks. He stinks. He's disgusting. He's going to drive away every decent customer we have. He's a human being." Richard stared at her like she'd spoken in tongues. "He's a problem, and you're fired." The words hit her like a physical blow. Fired. 3 years of perfect service, of covering other servers' shifts, of staying late and arriving early, of smiling through harassment and accepting poverty wages. All gone in an instant because she'd shown kindness to someone society had deemed unworthy. "You can't fire me for serving a customer," she said, but her voice shook. "I can fire you for insubordination, for ignoring direct orders, for creating a hostile environment." Richard crossed his arms, his smile vicious. "Clean out your locker and get out. Don't bother asking for a reference." Emma's mind raced. She needed this job. Her rent was due in 5 days. She had $17 in her checking account. Her car needed new brakes. Without this job, without a reference, she'd be exactly where that stranger outside was. 1 bad month away from sleeping in her car. 2 bad months away from losing the car entirely. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "No." Richard blinked. "Excuse me." "I said no. You can't fire me. I'm covered under the Employee Handbook, Section 4, Paragraph 3. No employee shall be terminated without written documentation of infractions and a formal review process. You want to fire me? Follow protocol. File your complaint. We'll let HR decide if basic human decency is grounds for termination." She had no idea if such a section existed. She'd never actually read the handbook, but Richard's face suggested she'd struck gold. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish drowning in air. "Get out of my office," he finally spat. "Get back to work, but that creature is your responsibility. When he can't pay, when he causes a scene, when he—" "I'll handle it," Emma interrupted. She turned and walked out before he could respond, before her courage could fail, before the full weight of what she'd just done could crush her. The stranger was sitting exactly where she'd left him, studying the menu with an intensity that seemed almost comical. The other diners had mostly returned to their meals, though she caught them stealing glances, whispering behind hands and wine glasses. She poured his coffee with steady hands. "Have you decided, sir?" He looked up at her, and again she was struck by those eyes. They seemed to see through her, into her, reading something she hadn't known was written there. "The lady risked her livelihood for me," he said softly. "The least I can do is order well. I'll have the ribeye, medium rare, with the roasted vegetables and garlic mashed potatoes, and perhaps a glass of the Cabernet." It was nearly a $60 order. Emma tried not to show her surprise. "Excellent choice. I'll get that in right away." As she walked toward the kitchen, she felt him watching her. It wasn't a creepy sensation, not predatory or entitled like some of the men who dined here. It was different. Assessing, like he was solving an equation, and she was the variable that didn't quite fit. The kitchen was chaos. Orders backed up, the head chef screaming at a line cook, steam and smoke, and the smell of burning butter thick in the air. She clipped the order to the wheel and turned to find Marcus, one of the other servers, staring at her. "Are you insane?" he whispered. "Richard's going to make your life hell." "Probably," she agreed. "And that guy, Emma, what if he can't pay? What if he's dangerous?" "Then I'll handle it," she said, echoing her words to Richard, trying to sound more confident than she felt. She checked on her other tables, refilling drinks, delivering appetizers, accepting compliments and complaints with equal grace. But her attention kept drifting to table 12, where the stranger sat perfectly still, perfectly straight, sipping his coffee with a precision that seemed almost ritualistic. When his meal arrived, she delivered it personally. "Please let me know if you need anything else." "Just your name," he said. She hesitated. "Emma. Emma." He repeated it like he was testing its weight, its flavor. "Thank you, Emma, for your kindness, for your courage. People like you are rare." Something in his tone made her uncomfortable. Not threatened, but seen in a way she wasn't used to. She smiled politely and retreated to the safety of her other tables. He ate slowly, methodically, cutting his steak with the precision of a surgeon. He didn't devour it like a starving man would. He savored it, appreciating it, like someone who understood quality. The other diners had stopped staring, their attention claimed by their own meals and conversations. Only Richard watched, standing near the bar, his arms crossed, his expression poisonous. When the stranger finished, Emma approached with the check. Her heart hammered. This was the moment. Either he'd been telling the truth about having money, or she'd just guaranteed her firing and possibly ended. Up covering a $60 tab on a night she'd made maybe 40 in tips. He looked at the check, reached into his filthy coat, and pulled out a black American Express card. Emma stared. A Centurion card. The kind of credit card that had no spending limit, that required a net worth in the millions just to qualify. The kind of card she'd only seen a handful of times in 3 years at Bellissimo, always attached to tech moguls and hedge fund managers. There must be some mistake, she said, automatically. No mistake. He handed it to her. Add 20% gratuity, please. Emma took the card with numb fingers and walked to the register. Richard intercepted her. Let me see that, he demanded, snatching the card from her hand. He examined it under the light, turning it over, checking for signs of forgery. His face went through several fascinating color changes, red to white to red again. Run it, he finally said. It's probably stolen. But the transaction went through, instantly. Approved. The receipt printed $73.67 for the meal, $14.73 tip. No fraud alert, no declined transaction, no drama. The stranger signed the receipt with a flourish, stood, and looked directly at Emma. You have restored a small amount of my faith in humanity tonight, Emma Mitchell. He'd read her name tag, she realized. That is a gift beyond price. Thank you. Then he walked out into the rain, leaving Emma standing there with a receipt and questions burning in her mind like fever. 3. Week that followed was brutal. Richard made good on his promise to make her life hell, assigning her the worst shifts, the most demanding tables, the sections furthest from the kitchen. He criticized everything, her posture, her timing, her smile. The other servers avoided her, not wanting to catch Richard's wrath by association. But Emma endured. She needed this job, and she'd learned long ago how to survive hostile environments. She thought about the stranger sometimes, late at night when sleep wouldn't come. The contrast between his appearance and that credit card haunted her. Who was he? Why had he come to Bellissimo dressed like that? Why had he been carrying a Centurion card in a coat held together with duct tape? 7 days after the incident, Emma was setting up her section for the dinner shift when the front doors opened. She glanced up automatically and nearly dropped the silverware she'd been arranging. The stranger stood in the entrance, but he'd been transformed. The matted hair was gone, replaced by a sharp cut that showed off strong features and startling blue eyes. The filthy clothes had been replaced by a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Emma made in 6 months. Italian shoes gleamed on his feet. A watch that could have funded a small country glinted at his wrist. He looked like he'd walked off the cover of Forbes magazine. But it was definitely him. Those eyes were unmistakable. Richard rushed forward, all smiles and obsequious bowing. Welcome to Bellissimo, sir. Do you have a reservation? No reservation, the man said, his voice carrying across the restaurant. I'm actually here on business. You are Richard Thornton, the general manager? Richard preened. Yes, sir. How may I assist you? By clearing out your office. You're fired. The restaurant went silent again. Richard's smile froze on his face, then cracked, then shattered. What? Sir? My name is Alexander Hayes, the man said, and Emma felt her heart stop. Alexander Hayes. She knew that name. Everyone in Chicago's restaurant industry knew that name. He owned Hayes Hospitality Group, 12 high-end restaurants across the country, including Bellissimo. He was a legend, a ghost, a name whispered in reverence and fear, and he was standing in the entrance, wearing the face of the homeless man she'd defended last week. I've been conducting an experiment, Alexander continued, his voice cold and precise, testing the character of my management teams, seeing who treats all people with dignity regardless of their appearance, and who reveals their true nature when they think no one important is watching. You, Mr. Thornton, failed spectacularly. Richard's mouth opened and closed. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Sir, I was just protecting the establishment. You were exercising cruelty because you could, because you enjoyed it, because you've convinced yourself that wealth gives you permission to treat others as less than human." Alexander's gaze swept the restaurant, landing on Emma. "Where is Emma Mitchell?" Emma's hand shot up automatically, like a student called on in class. "Here, sir." He walked toward her, and she noticed the entire staff stepping back, creating a path like Moses parting the Red Sea. When he reached her, he smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "Miss Mitchell, I owe you an apology for deceiving you. And I owe you thanks for passing a test you didn't know you were taking. Your actions last week displayed exactly the kind of character I want representing my company." He turned to address the room. "Effective immediately, Emma Mitchell is promoted to General Manager of Bellissimo. Richard, you have 1 hour to clear out." The world tilted sideways. Emma grabbed the table behind her for support. "Sir, I don't have management experience. I've never—" "You have something more valuable than experience," Alexander interrupted. "You have integrity. You have empathy. You have courage. Everything else can be taught." He handed her a business card. "Report to my office at headquarters tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. We'll discuss the details of your new position, including a salary of $90,000 annually, full benefits, and a signing bonus." Emma stared at the card. The numbers he'd mentioned didn't feel real. $90,000. She currently made $22,000. The difference was life-changing. It was the difference between surviving and actually living. "Thank you," she whispered, because anything louder would have turned into a sob. Alexander nodded and turned to leave, but then paused. "Oh, and Miss Mitchell, wear something comfortable tomorrow. We have a lot of work to do." Then he was gone, leaving Emma standing in the middle of the restaurant with every eye on her and her entire life transformed in the span of 5 minutes. Richard left quietly, his face the color of old cheese, his career in Chicago's restaurant scene effectively over. The other servers suddenly remembered they'd always liked Emma, had always thought she was great. Marcus brought her a glass of wine after the dinner rush, grinning. "To the new boss," he said. Emma laughed, still in shock, still not quite believing this was real. But the card in her pocket was solid and tangible, proof that sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing didn't punish you. Sometimes it elevated you. The next morning, Emma showed up at Hayes Hospitality headquarters wearing her best dress, which wasn't particularly impressive, but it was clean and professional. The office occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper overlooking Lake Michigan. The reception area alone was larger than her apartment, all marble and steel and glass, modern art on the walls that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Alexander met her personally, shaking her hand with a warmth that surprised her. "Emma, thank you for coming. Let's talk in my office." His office was somehow both intimidating and comfortable. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. A desk the size of a car held 3 computer monitors and a phone that looked like it could launch missiles. But there were also personal touches, photos of what looked like family, books on the shelves, a comfortable seating area with a coffee machine that probably cost more than Emma's car. "Coffee," he offered. "Please." They sat in the seating area rather than across his massive desk, which Emma appreciated. It felt less like a job interview and more like, well, not exactly friends, but at least equals. "I meant what I said yesterday," Alexander began. "You demonstrated exactly the qualities I need in my management team. But I also need to be honest with you. This promotion is going to be hard. You'll be managing people who have more experience than you, some who will resent that you got promoted over them. You'll be learning on the job, making decisions that affect dozens of employees and thousands of customers. It's going to be stressful and demanding and sometimes thankless. Emma met his eyes. I've been poor my entire adult life, Mr. Hayes. I've worked 3 jobs at once to keep my mother alive when she was sick. I've chosen between eating and paying the electric bill. I've endured sexual harassment and wage theft and bosses who treated me like dirt because they could. Hard doesn't scare me. I'm not afraid of work. What scares me is staying stuck, staying, powerless, staying invisible. If you're offering me a chance to be more than that, I'll take it. And I'll work harder than anyone you've ever employed to prove you didn't make a mistake. Alexander smiled slowly. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Welcome to Hayes Hospitality, Emma. Let's get to work. The first month was a baptism by fire. Alexander didn't give her the job and abandon her. He became her teacher, her mentor, her guide through the treacherous waters of restaurant management. He taught her how to read financial statements, how to negotiate with suppliers, how to handle difficult employees and even more difficult customers. He showed her the delicate balance between profitability and quality, between business and art. They spent long hours together, often working late into the evening. Emma discovered that Alexander was brilliant but lonely, driven but isolated. He told her one night when they were reviewing employee schedules about his wife, Catherine, who died 3 years ago from cancer, leaving him with an empire to run and a hole in his chest that nothing seemed to fill. I threw myself into work, he said, staring out at the city lights. Built 2 new restaurants, renovated 4 others, expanded into 3 new cities. Everyone said I was driven, ambitious, brilliant. But the truth was, I was just trying to outrun grief, trying to stay so busy I wouldn't have to feel. Emma understood that impulse viscerally. When my mom died, I worked constantly. Double shifts, triple shifts. I'd come home so exhausted I'd fall asleep immediately, no time to think, no space to feel. It worked for a while, until it didn't. What changed? He asked. She thought about it. I realized I was surviving but not living, and she wouldn't have wanted that. She used to say that the greatest tribute we can pay to the people we love is to actually live, to be present, to be open, to let ourselves feel joy even when grief is still there. Alexander looked at her for a long moment. Your mother was a wise woman. She was the best person I've ever known, Emma said simply. Something shifted between them that night. The professional distance they'd maintained began to blur at the edges. Conversations that started about profit margins would drift into philosophy, books, childhood memories. Alexander started asking her opinion not just on business matters but on everything: art, politics, the best pizza in Chicago. And Emma found herself looking forward to their meetings, not just as a boss and employee, but as something else, something more complicated and dangerous. She tried to be logical about it. He was her boss. He was a billionaire. He was grieving. She was 26 and learning to be a general manager. This was professional development, not a relationship. But logic had never been particularly good at controlling the heart. 6 months into her new role, Emma had transformed bellissimo. Employee satisfaction was up, turnover was down, and revenue had increased 15%. Alexander praised her work publicly and privately. The other restaurant managers in the Hayes group had stopped resenting her and started asking her advice. She'd proven herself. She'd earned this. But she'd also fallen hopelessly, stupidly, dangerously in love with Alexander Hayes. She'd fought it. God, she'd fought it. She'd reminded herself of all the reasons it was a terrible idea: the power imbalance, the professional complications, the fact that she'd probably just be a rebound, a distraction from his grief. But love didn't care about logic or lists of reasons. It just grew, stubborn and relentless, blooming in the spaces between their conversations, fed by every shared smile and moment of understanding. She was fairly certain he felt something too. She caught him looking at her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite decode. Longing mixed with resistance, desire tangled with fear. But he never crossed that line. Never touched her. Beyond professional handshakes. Never let the conversation drift into anything that could be construed as flirtation. And then Marcus, her former co-worker who was now a server she managed, approached her one afternoon with concern written all over his face. "Emma, you need to know something. Richard is back." Her stomach dropped. "What? Where?" "He got hired at Janelli's, and he's been talking, spreading rumors about you and Mr. Hayes, saying you slept your way into the promotion, that the whole homeless test thing was staged, that you're just a gold digger who got lucky." Emma felt something cold and sharp lodge in her chest. "That's insane. None of that is true." "I know, but people are listening. And Emma—" Marcus hesitated. "Richard's cousin is married to a food critic at the Tribune. They're sniffing around, asking questions about you and Mr. Hayes, about the circumstances of your promotion. It could get ugly." It got ugly faster than Emma anticipated. The Tribune ran a piece 2 weeks later. From server to manager, a Cinderella story or workplace scandal. The article didn't make direct accusations, that would have been libelous, but it asked pointed questions about Emma's qualifications, about her relationship with Alexander, about whether Hayes' hospitality group was practicing favoritism over merit. The comment section was brutal. People she'd never met dissected her life, her appearance, her intelligence. They called her an opportunist, a social climber. Worse. Her social media filled with messages ranging from curious to cruel. Other restaurant workers, jealous or judgmental, spread the story further. Emma sat in her apartment, reading the article for the 4th time, feeling everything she'd built crumbling around her. She'd worked so hard. She'd proven herself. But none of that mattered now. She was just another woman accused of sleeping her way to success, her competence questioned, her integrity doubted. Her phone rang. "Alexander." "Have you seen it?" he asked without preamble. "Yes." "I'm calling our lawyers. We'll issue a statement. We'll sue for defamation." "No," Emma interrupted. Silence. Then, "Emma, we can't let them. If you defend me, it makes it worse. It makes it look like you're protecting me because we're involved. It validates their narrative." She laughed bitterly. "The only way to win is to prove I earned this position through competence, which I have, which doesn't matter because people will believe what they want to believe. So what do you want to do?" Emma closed her eyes. "I'm going to resign." "Absolutely not. I won't accept Alexander." She used his first name deliberately, breaking the professional barrier they'd maintained. "I can't do my job if everyone believes I'm only there because I'm sleeping with you. The staff won't respect me. Customers will doubt us. Suppliers will try to take advantage. My presence hurts your business. Better to cut losses now." "You're not a loss to be cut," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're the best thing that's happened to this company in years. The best thing that's happened to me since Catherine died." Emma's breath caught. "Alexander, I'm not asking you to stay for the company. I'm asking you to stay for me. Because somewhere in the last 8 months, you became essential. You became everything. And I'm terrified of losing you." It was the confession she'd been hoping for and dreading in equal measure. Because timing mattered, and this was possibly the worst possible timing in the history of declarations. "I can't be the woman people think I am," Emma whispered. "I can't be the gold digger, the opportunist, the one who slept her way up. I've been poor my entire life, but I've been honest. My integrity is all I have. Then we'll prove them wrong. Together." "How?" Emma demanded, frustration bleeding into anger. "How do we prove that without looking like we're covering up exactly what they're accusing us of?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady and determined. The Hayes Hospitality Annual Gala. 2 weeks. 500 guests, restaurant critics, business partners, community leaders, press. I'll address this publicly. I'll lay out exactly what happened, why I promoted you, and what you've accomplished. I'll show them your numbers, your innovations, your results. And then I'll do something I haven't done in 3 years. I'll tell the truth about how I feel. Alexander: That's terrifying? Yes. Risky? Absolutely. But you taught me something 8 months ago when you stood up to Richard. Sometimes doing the right thing means risking everything. You risked your job for a stranger. I can risk my reputation for you. Emma felt tears burning her eyes. What if it doesn't work? What if they don't believe you? Then we'll figure out our next move. But at least we'll be doing it together, if you'll have me. If I haven't completely screwed this up by being too much. Of a coward to tell you how I felt earlier. Emma laughed through her tears. You're not a coward. You're grieving. That's different. Catherine would have liked you, Alexander said softly. She always said I needed someone who'd challenge me, keep me honest, remind me what matters. You do all of that. I'm not trying to replace her. You couldn't. No one could. But Emma, loving her doesn't mean I can't love again. It means I know how precious love is, how rare, how much it hurts to lose it, and I'm choosing to risk that pain again because you're worth it. Emma wiped her eyes, her heart hammering. Okay, 2 weeks. We'll face this together. The days leading up to the gala were tense. Richard doubled down on his rumors, going on a podcast to discuss toxic workplace dynamics and inappropriate relationships in the restaurant industry. More articles followed, some more sympathetic than others, all contributing to a narrative Emma couldn't seem to escape. But Alexander was true to his word. He stood beside her, publicly and privately. He sent a company-wide email praising her work and attaching detailed reports of Bellissimo's improved performance. He gave interviews highlighting her innovations. He made it clear, without saying it explicitly, that Emma Mitchell was an asset to Hayes Hospitality, promoted on merit, retained for results. The night of the gala, Emma stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the simple black dress she'd bought for the occasion. Nothing too flashy, nothing that would feed the gold digger narrative. Elegant but modest, professional but feminine. She looked like exactly what she was, a young woman who'd worked hard, earned her place, and refused to apologize for either. Alexander picked her up personally, driving himself rather than using his usual driver. You look beautiful, he said when she opened the door. You clean up pretty well yourself, she replied, smiling despite her nerves. The gala was held at the Peninsula Hotel in a ballroom that dripped crystal and elegance. 500 guests milled around drinking champagne, discussing business, pretending not to notice Emma's arrival, but absolutely noticing. She felt their eyes, heard the whispers, saw the speculation. Alexander kept his hand on the small of her back, a gesture of support, of solidarity. Ignore them, he murmured. They'll see the truth soon enough. Dinner was an elaborate affair. 7 courses, each paired with wine, each more expensive than the last. Emma barely tasted any of it, her stomach twisted with anxiety. She made polite conversation with the people at her table, a food critic from the Sun-Times, a chef from New York, a restaurant investor from San Francisco. They were cordial but distant, clearly aware of the controversy, clearly reserving judgment. After dessert, Alexander stood and approached the microphone at the front of the room. The conversations died away. 500 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Good evening. Everyone, thank you for coming to our annual gala. As many of you know, Hayes Hospitality has had an interesting year. Polite laughter rippled through the room. There's been considerable discussion about one of my personnel decisions, specifically the promotion of Emma Mitchell to General Manager of Bellissimo. So tonight, I'd like to address that directly. Emma's heart hammered. This was it. The moment that would either vindicate her or destroy everything. 8 months ago, I conducted an experiment. I wanted to understand who my employees truly were when they thought no one important was watching. So I disguised myself as a homeless person and visited several of my restaurants. Gasps and murmurs ran through the audience. At most locations, I was turned away, ignored, or treated with barely concealed disgust. But at Bellissimo, something different happened. A server named Emma Mitchell saw me being humiliated by her manager, and she chose to defend me. She risked her job, knowing she'd likely be fired, to treat a stranger with basic human dignity. He paused, letting that sink in. In that moment, Emma demonstrated the qualities I most value: courage, empathy, integrity. So yes, I promoted her. Not because of any inappropriate relationship, we were strangers at that point, but because she showed me who she truly was. And in the 8 months since, she's proven that my instinct was correct. Under Emma's management, Bellissimo has increased revenue by 18%, improved employee retention by 35%, and achieved the highest customer satisfaction scores in our company's history. Those aren't the results of nepotism or favoritism. Those are the results of competence, dedication, and exceptional leadership. Alexander looked directly at Emma, and she saw something fierce and determined in his gaze. But there's something else I need to say tonight. Something personal. Emma Mitchell didn't just prove herself as a manager, she proved herself as a person. Over these months of working together, she's become my friend, my confidant, my counsel. She's challenged me, supported me, reminded me what matters beyond profit margins and expansion plans. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with her. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, the sound of 500 people processing a confession they hadn't expected. I know what some of you are thinking, Alexander continued, his voice rising over the noise. That this validates the rumors, that this proves she slept her way into the promotion. But here's the thing. I didn't act on these feelings. Neither did Emma. We maintained a completely professional relationship because we both understood the optics, the complications, the potential for exactly this kind of speculation. But I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending that falling in love with a competent, intelligent, remarkable woman somehow diminishes her achievements. Emma didn't get promoted because I loved her. I fell in love with her because of the same qualities that made her an excellent manager: her character, her courage, her unwavering integrity. He turned back to the audience. If anyone wants to question her competence, look at the numbers. If anyone wants to question her character, look at her actions. And if anyone wants to question my judgment, know this. Emma Mitchell is the best decision I've made in 3 years, professionally and personally. I won't apologize for recognizing excellence, and I won't apologize for loving someone who deserves to be loved. The room was silent. Emma felt tears streaming down her face, felt the weight of 500 pairs of eyes, felt the moment stretching out like elastic about to snap. Then someone started clapping. The food critic from the Sun-Times, then someone else joined in, then more. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was applauding, the sound building to a crescendo that seemed to shake the chandeliers. Alexander walked toward Emma's table, extended his hand. "Dance with me?" She took his hand, let him lead her to the dance floor. The orchestra started playing, something slow and romantic. Alexander pulled her close, and Emma buried her face in his shoulder, overwhelmed by emotion. "You're insane," she whispered. "You just told 500 people you're in love with me." "I know. Was that okay?" Emma pulled back to look at him, saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear that maybe he'd gone too far, moved too fast, exposed too much. "It was perfect," she said. Because I'm in love with you, too. Have been for months. Was too scared to say it. Alexander smiled, the first completely unguarded smile she'd ever seen from him. So what do we do now? I guess we finish this dance, and then we figure out the rest together. They swayed together, surrounded by witnesses, their relationship no longer a secret or a scandal, but a declaration. And Emma realized that sometimes the universe tested you, and sometimes you passed, and sometimes the reward was beyond anything you could have imagined. 1 year later, Emma stood in the backyard of the house she and Alexander had bought together. A beautiful Victorian in Lincoln Park, with a garden and a porch swing, and room for the life they were building. She watched Alexander manning the grill, his sleeves rolled up, laughing at something Marcus was saying. It was Thanksgiving, and they'd invited the entire Bellissimo staff for dinner. A tradition they'd started, a way of saying that Hayes Hospitality was more than a corporation, it was a family. Inside, the house smelled like turkey and stuffing and all the traditional American dishes that made this holiday special. The table was set for 25. Music played from the speakers. Through the window, Emma could see her team, people she'd trained, promoted, supported, drinking wine and swapping stories and being genuinely happy. Alexander caught her looking and smiled, that private smile he reserved just for her. He set down the tongs and walked over, pulling her close. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Emma leaned against him, watched the sun setting over their garden, felt the warmth of his arms and the solidity of their life together. "I'm thinking about that night at Bellissimo, when I decided to defend a stranger and risk everything. How that one moment changed my entire life." "Mine too," Alexander said. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed silent, if you'd let Richard throw me out. Would I have found another restaurant where someone proved themselves? Or would I have given up on the test, decided humanity was beyond redemption?" "But I didn't stay silent," Emma reminded him. "And you didn't give up. And here we are." "Here we are," he echoed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Building a life, running a company, hosting Thanksgiving dinner for 25 people who are currently drinking all our good wine." Emma laughed. "It's a good life. It's an extraordinary life, with an extraordinary woman, who taught me that sometimes the most valuable things in life come disguised as risks worth taking." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. Inside, someone called out that dinner was ready. Emma could hear laughter, conversation, the sounds of people who felt at home. She thought about that girl she'd been a year ago, scared, struggling, working double shifts in threadbare clothes, and marveled at the journey that had brought her here. Sometimes the universe tested you. Sometimes you passed. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the reward was love in all its forms, romantic and professional, chosen family and built community, courage vindicated and kindness returned. Sometimes the homeless stranger you defended turned out to be the love of your life. Sometimes standing up for what was right led to everything you never knew you needed. Emma took Alexander's hand and walked toward the house, toward the warmth and light and all those people waiting, toward the life she'd earned through 1 moment of courage and 8 months of proving herself, toward the future they were building together, 1 day at a time, 1 choice at a time, 1 act of humanity at a time. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel and rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments below. Your engagement means everything and helps us share more stories like this one.